Solomon Greer was 40 years old the morning his wife stood in the kitchen and told him she was keeping the house. He drove a work truck with a cracked windshield and dried concrete on the running boards. He wore the same 3 flannels on rotation and kept his hands calloused the way working hands stay when a man uses them the way they were intended. Nicole's friends in her book club called him the builder, not unkindly, exactly, but in the way you name a piece of furniture after its function. He had never corrected them, and Nicole had never corrected them either, which told him something he had filed away without acting on. She said it on a Tuesday morning in October with her attorney's business card on the table between them and a speech she had clearly rehearsed. The house was hers, she said. She had already spoken to someone about the back acreage. She was keeping all of it. She said it the way a person announces a decision that only needs one acknowledgement to become real. Over the preceding 11 months, $61,000 had moved out of their joint accounts in careful, methodical increments into an account bearing only her name. What Nicole did not know, what Brent Holloway, who had twice walked that back acreage with a developer's eye and a surveyor's app on his phone, did not know either, was that there was a framed document on the wall of Solomon's home office that neither of them had ever read. The ground that house was built on had never been hers. It had never been theirs. It had always been his. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The house had taken Solomon 2 years and 4 months to build, and every hour of that time was visible to anyone who knew what they were looking at. He had poured the foundation himself on a Saturday in March, with 2 cousins and a rented mixer, smoothed it at the corners by hand, set the anchor bolts at the depth his father had shown him. He had framed the walls with lumber he had milled and dried himself, raised the ridgeline on a clear November morning, and laid the wide plank oak floors board by board through the following winter, sanding them 3 times before the finish satisfied him. The stone fireplace in the living room had taken 6 weeks alone, fieldstone pulled from the back of the property, cut and mortared into a pattern that carried the east wall from floor to ceiling with a kind of weight that did not ask for anyone's approval. He had built it on land his father had spent 20 years saving to own. Arthur Greer had worked maintenance for the Memphis School District for 31 years. He had lived in a rented house and driven a second-hand car and kept the same watch for 2 decades, and saved with the patience of a man who understood that the thing he was building toward was not money, but permanence. In 1997, he purchased 14 acres in Shelby County. Unimproved land, red clay and cedar scrub just outside the city's eastern edge, and he drove Solomon out to see it on a Sunday afternoon when Solomon was 15. He put his hand flat on the ground and said, "This is ours now. Nobody can take what's in the deed." Arthur died when Solomon was 29. The land transferred to the Arthur Greer Family Trust, with Solomon as sole trustee and sole beneficiary, exactly as Arthur had written it. Solomon built the house 3 years after. His mother, Clara Greer, still lived 4 miles away in the house where Solomon had grown up. She was 71, and she had watched Solomon build this house from the ground up, brought food to the worksite on Saturdays, sat in the empty framed structure before the walls went up and said that Arthur would have been something to see right now. She had been saying, for the past 2 years, in the careful way of a woman who chose her moments precisely, "I'm watching that woman. Solomon, I'm watching her real close." He had told her he was watching too. In the home office, the small room he kept for professional work, survey maps lay rolled on the drafting table. Certification plaques lined the far wall, and beside the door, framed in dark walnut, hung the original survey plat of the 14-acre Greer parcel, Arthur Greer's name in the description block, the trust designation printed below it, the boundary lines of every acre rendered in ink by the surveyor Arthur had hired in 1997. Solomon had it reprinted and framed the year after he finished the house. Nicole had walked past it 700 times. She had never stopped to read what it said. On a Wednesday morning, Nicole was at the kitchen island with the focused energy of someone managing two conversations at once. Her coffee on one side, her phone face down when he entered, her eyes up and warm and a half-second behind where they should have been. She asked about the Henderson survey out in Collierville. He said it was Thursday. She said good. Then, easily, she mentioned that someone had left a card about the back acreage. A developer, interested in the parcel. She said she'd left the card on the island for him. He picked it up. Holloway Development Group, Memphis. He turned it over. Nothing on the back. He said he'd look into it. His second phone, the one registered to Greer Land Holdings, his surveying and property development company, known to his partner, his attorney Josephine Tate, and his CPA, sat in the breast pocket of his work vest on the hook by the door. It had been there every day for 9 years. Nicole had never thought to ask about it. He had met Nicole at a city planning commission meeting 6 years ago, when she was a project coordinator for a community development firm, and he had come to present survey documentation for a rezoning request. She was sharp and well prepared, and she had laughed at exactly the right moment during a tense exchange with a commissioner, which broke the room and made him look at her and not look away. She was good at reading rooms. She was good at making people comfortable. He had believed for a long time that those were the same as being good. He understood now they were different skills. He kissed her cheek and said he'd be back by 5. He was backing out of the driveway when his attorney texted him, "Are you free this afternoon?" Something came up on the Greer parcel. "You need to see it." He called her from the road before he reached the end of the block. Joe's alert had come from a county records notification she had set up years ago on the Greer family trust parcel, a routine precaution for property held in trust. What triggered it was a preliminary development inquiry filed with the Shelby County Planning Commission, a plat application for the subdivision of the Greer acreage into 12 residential development lots. The applicant was Holloway Development Group. The landowner authorization signature on page 4 of the filing, required for any plat application, bore Solomon's name. He had not signed it. He sat in Joe's office on Union Avenue and looked at the document for a long time without changing expression. There was work to be done before feelings had any practical value, and he was a man who had always understood the order of operations. His hands didn't shake. His face remained perfectly calm. The signature was a competent approximation, close enough that a clerk processing a standard filing might not examine it twice. But it was not his, and he had been reading his own signature for 40 years. Joe had already requested the original filing from the Planning Commission and initiated a handwriting analysis referral through the proper channels. The application had been submitted using a filer authorization code registered to Holloway Development Group. The date on the filing was 7 weeks prior. He drove home. He did not go inside immediately. He sat in the driveway and considered the sequence of the past 2 months, Nicole's energy, the phone tilted away at breakfast, the long, unaccounted afternoons, the Holloway Development card placed casually on the island as though it had arrived by coincidence. He came inside through the back door. Nicole was out. He went to the home office and opened the shared family tablet on his desk, the device they had used for calendars and household logistics since the 2nd year of their marriage. She had not logged out of her personal email. He did not read her correspondence. The subject lines visible in the preview panel were sufficient. 3 emails from a Holloway Development address in the past 6 weeks. Greer Parcel Timeline. Signature page. Plat filing. Phase 1 development budget. He photographed the screen with his secure phone. He stepped back without opening any of them. He pulled 3 years of joint bank statements from their shared account login. The pattern emerged the way a boundary error emerged on a survey. Invisible until you applied the correct instrument, then impossible to unsee. Transfers to an account he had no record of, ranging from $2,000 to $6,500 across 11 months in irregular intervals. He cross-referenced the transfer dates against the shared calendar they had both used for years. 15 of the 19 transfers fell within 5 days of an appointment marked only with initials, BH 11 months. 19 transfers. One set of initials appearing beside every significant financial movement in their joint accounts. Total, $61,000. He moved with the same methodical calm he applied to every survey. Document what is there. Do not alter it. Missed nothing. She had no idea, across any of those 11 months, that the man she was moving against had built his entire career on knowing exactly where every line was and whose name was on the right side of it. He photographed every bank statement page. He forwarded everything to Joe's encrypted email. He opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it Nicole. Josephine Tate had practiced real estate and family law in Memphis for 27 years. Her office on Union Avenue was quiet in the specific way of rooms where serious conclusions arrived without theater. She spread Solomon's evidence across her conference table alongside the documents she had already pulled, and she did not change expression once across the full review. When she finished, she set her glasses down. The Arthur Greer Family Trust was executed in 2003, and the land transferred into it upon Arthur's death in 2011, she said. Solomon Greer is sole trustee and sole beneficiary. The trust predates this marriage by 8 years. The house was built on trust property using Solomon's personal and professional resources, and constitutes an improvement to trust land under the trust's standing provisions. That language was drafted carefully. Arthur's attorney included it specifically to ensure that any future improvements made by the trustee would remain trust property regardless of marital status. Joe looked at him. The full Greer parcel was independently assessed by Shelby County at $2.3 million last year. None of it, not the house, not the land, not a single square foot, is marital property. There is nothing for her to claim and nothing to contest. Solomon nodded. The forged authorization is a separate criminal matter, Joe continued. I've referred it to the Dawes office and requested the full analysis from the Planning Commission. If Holloway submitted that application, he is exposed to forgery and fraudulent misrepresentation charges. If Nicole directed him to submit it, she shares that exposure. She set her pen down. The plat application will be withdrawn. That back acreage isn't going anywhere except where you put it. She looked at him directly. She thought she was keeping a house, Joe said. She had no idea she was reaching for something that was never in her range. Real power, his father had always said, was in knowing whose name was in the deed. 2 evenings later, Solomon drove to his mother's house on Fraser Boulevard. Clara Greer set a table the way she did everything, with care and without excess, and she listened to all of it over the meal without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Your daddy worked 31 years so his name could be in that deed, she said. She was not loud about it. She had never been loud about things that mattered. He used to tell me, the land is the last honest thing. You can lie about everything else, but the deed tells the truth about what belongs to who. She set down her fork. That woman's going to find out what a deed says. She passed him more cornbread. You built every room in that house with your hands, she said. I watched you do it. A woman who would walk out of it for somebody else's money never deserved to walk into it in the first place. She looked at him steadily. Your daddy would have said the same. Solomon drove back through the dark to the house on the Greer land and sat on the east-facing porch and looked out at the 14 acres and felt the specific settled grief of a man who understands exactly what has been lost and exactly what has not. Harold McCoy, the private investigator Solomon had used twice before on commercial property disputes, delivered his full report on Brent Holloway the following Thursday. Holloway Development Group had been operating in Memphis for 4 years. Before that, Brent Holloway had been a partner in a smaller development firm in Jackson that dissolved amid allegations of fraudulent property documentation, a civil suit by his former partner, settled under non-disclosure, for an undisclosed amount. Holloway's current Memphis portfolio had 3 active development proposals, all structured with third-party landowners who had been approached without documented authorization from the actual property holders. The Greer parcel was not his first unauthorized filing. It was the first one with a forged signature on it. Harold had also confirmed, through a source inside the Holloway development offices, that Nicole had been present at 3 meetings there over the previous 4 months. In 2 of those meetings, the development potential of the back Greer acreage had been the primary subject of discussion. Solomon added the report to the folder and closed the laptop. He went inside and made dinner at the walnut slab table he had built from a single piece he found at an estate sale in Germantown 3 years ago. Nicole came home 40 minutes later and sat across from him, and was warm and conversational, and managed the evening with the practiced ease of someone running 2 timelines at once. She mentioned the back room. She had been thinking it might work better as a home office than a guest room. She said she'd been thinking about it a lot lately. He filled her glass and said it sounded like something worth thinking through carefully. He was watching all of it the way a surveyor watches a property line, knowing exactly where it was, saying nothing about it until the right moment arrived. Some lines were already drawn before anyone drove a stake into the ground. Joe had chosen the house, Solomon's suggestion, not her usual preference. But there was a reason to do it here, in this room, on this ground, and Joe had understood when he explained it. The meeting was Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. Nicole's attorney, a capable family law practitioner named Douglas, who had the specific confidence of someone who had reviewed the property appraisal and considered this uncomplicated, arrived with Nicole and settled at the desk in the home office. Joe sat across from them. Clara Greer sat in the corner chair with her hands folded and her eyes open. She had driven herself over at 8:30. Nicole looked around the room with the expression of someone taking quiet inventory of what was already hers. She did not look at the frame on the wall beside the door. She had never looked at the frame on the wall beside the door. Douglas opened his briefcase and placed a property appraisal on the desk. The house and surrounding developed lot, assessed at $487,000 for the marital claim. He set it forward with the confidence of a man who had done his preparation. Joe opened hers. She placed the Arthur Greer Family Trust document on the desk first. Execution date September 14th, 2003. Then the transfer deed, Arthur Greer to the Arthur Greer Family Trust, dated March 3rd, 2011. Then the trustee designation, Solomon Aaron Greer, sole trustee and sole beneficiary, effective March 3rd, 2011. Then the marriage certificate, Solomon Aaron Greer and Nicole Denise Prescott, June 12, 2019. She laid them out in order, without speaking, one at a time. Douglas looked at the trust execution date. He looked at the transfer date. He looked at the marriage date. He set his pen down. Joe placed the survey plat last, a copy of the same document framed on the wall beside the door, with the Greer parcel boundaries rendered in ink and Arthur Greer's name in the description block and the trust designation printed below it, and set it in front of Nicole. The Greer parcel encompasses 14 acres in Shelby County, Joe said, including the 2-acre lot on which this house stands. The land transferred to the Arthur Greer Family Trust 8 years before this marriage. The house constitutes an improvement on trust property under the trust's standing provisions and is therefore trust property as well. The full parcel was assessed by Shelby County at $2.3 million. She paused. None of it is marital property. None of it is subject to any claim in this proceeding. Douglas had stopped writing. Nicole looked at Joe. Then at Solomon. Then, for the first time since she had walked into this room, she looked at the frame on the wall beside the door. She looked at it the way a person looks at something they have passed 1,000 times without reading and are reading now for the first time. She had no idea, not the morning she told Solomon she was keeping the house, not the 11 months before it, when she and Brent Holloway had been building a plan on ground they believed was theirs to stand on, that the house she intended to claim was built on land that had been protected, documented, and secured before she had ever set foot on it. Joe was not finished. She placed the Shelby County plat application on the desk. The forged signature on page 4. The Holloway Development Group authorization code. Then the email printout. Nicole's account, Holloway's account. Subject line re, signature page, plat filing, and Nicole's reply timestamp 10 weeks prior. Use the format I showed you. Match it exactly. Nicole's expression moved through 3 distinct stages. The practiced composure, the rapid recalibration, then something past recalibration, the look of a person who has been standing on what they believed was solid ground and has just understood that it was not. I didn't know that he was going to, Mrs. Greer. Joe's voice was not unkind. It was simply not available for that direction. That email came from your account. It references a format you provided. The Planning Commission has been notified, and the Dawes office received the referral this morning. She closed her portfolio. I would suggest your attorney advise you before you continue. Douglas placed his hand lightly on the desk. Nicole stopped. Solomon had said nothing through any of it. He had sat at his own desk, in his own office, in his own house, on his own land, and watched it complete itself with the patience of a man who had measured every distance before driving a single stake. He looked at Nicole for one moment. My father spent 30 years of his life putting his name on this land, he said. He was not loud. He had never needed to be. He did it so nothing built on top of it could be taken. That's what land is, the thing that holds its ground when everything else shifts. He stood and straightened his jacket. A deed tells the truth. He told me that when I was 15. You should have read the frame on the wall. He picked up his portfolio. He walked through the house he had framed and floored and finished board by board. Through the kitchen, with the stone counters set at exactly the height a working man needed. Through the hall where the floors caught morning light the same way they had the day he finished sanding them, and out the back door onto the east-facing porch. The 14 acres spread out in front of him in the October light, every inch exactly where it had always been. 9 months passed like a season turning over. The back acreage, 11 of the 14 acres beyond the house's immediate lot, had been surveyed, platted, and permitted by spring, with Solomon's actual signature on every page. The project was not what Holloway Development had imagined. It was 44 units of workforce housing, built to the Greer standard, every foundation poured to hold. The first 3 structures had framed walls by June. Solomon had laid 2 of those foundations himself, with his own hands, on a Friday and Saturday, because some things you did yourself to remember what they meant. Greer Land Holdings had expanded into 3 new counties over the same period. A municipal contract Solomon had been negotiating for 2 years. Survey and land management work for a Shelby County green corridor closed in July, a 5-year engagement at $940,000 annually. His partner wanted to celebrate immediately. Solomon said they would celebrate at the groundbreaking. They celebrated at the groundbreaking. Pearl had come through work. A county planning commissioner he had presented documentation to twice over the previous year and a half. She was methodical and patient, and she asked precise questions, and had done the research to back her opinions, and did not adjust her posture depending on who was in the room. On a Saturday in August, she walked the full 14 acres with Solomon in the morning, asking about the topography and what his father had been thinking when he chose this particular ground, and Solomon told her the whole story. From the Sunday afternoon when Arthur put his hand flat on the red clay to the Thursday morning in the home office, when the framed plat finally got read. She listened to all of it without interrupting. That was the beginning of something real. Brent Holloway's development license had been suspended pending the conclusion of a criminal investigation into the forged plat authorization and 3 related unauthorized filings the Dawes office had identified during the inquiry. His Memphis operation had closed. His attorney had issued one brief statement. Nicole had received what the settlement entitled her to: her vehicle, her personal accounts, the jointly purchased furniture. The marital home and the Greer parcel were not in the proceeding. Her attorney had reviewed the trust documents and had not challenged them. Clara Greer had Solomon over for Sunday dinner 2 months after the settlement finalized. She did not say much about any of it. She passed him the bread and said, "Your daddy would have been proud of how you handled yourself." Then she told him to eat. He ate. On a morning in October, Solomon sat on the east-facing porch with his coffee in both hands and looked out at the Greer land, the framed structures of the workforce housing visible across the back acreage, the cedar and red oak along the old property boundary, the iron survey pin in the corner of the lot that he had driven into the ground himself the spring before he poured the foundation, right where the boundary said it should be. Everything in its place. Everything where it had always been. The land was here before you were born, his father had told him, and it'll be here after. You tend it right. He had tended it right. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.